The year 1901 marked the dawn of a new century, filled with innovation, political change, and cultural milestones. From the assassination of a president to the very beginnings of certain titans of business, 1901 was a pivotal year that helped shape the course of American history. The 6 colonies of Australia united on January 1st to form the Commonwealth of Australia, which was under the British Crown. This international event marked a shift in British imperial structure and was closely observed by the U.S. On January 8th, the confessed killer Albert Packer, also known as the Colorado Cannibal, is released after serving 18 years for the death of 5 gold prospectors. They had become stranded in severe winter weather in the mountains of Colorado, and Packer confessed he had eaten them in order to survive. On January 10th, a drilling rig near Beaumont, Texas, struck oil at Spindletop Hill, releasing a massive gusher. This discovery triggered the Texas oil boom and helped make petroleum a dominant American industry. January 22nd is the day that Queen Victoria died, after a 63-year reign. This ended the Victorian era and altered the global political landscape. Her passing symbolized the end of one era and the beginning of a new century of change. On January 28th, Major League Baseball officially acknowledged the American League as a rival to the National League. This helped lay the groundwork for the World Series, first held in 1903. On March 2nd, financier J.P. Morgan created U.S. Steel by combining Carnegie Steel and other companies. It became the world's first billion-dollar corporation and a symbol of American industrial might. On March 15th, paintings by the late Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh are shown at a gallery in Paris, in what was the artist's first retrospective exhibit. The 71 paintings caused a sensation across the art world. Van Gogh had died 11 years earlier by suicide, having never known any success as an artist. New York becomes the first state to require car owners to register their vehicles and display license plates on April 25th. At the time, plates were homemade and typically displayed the owner's initials. The Pan American Exposition opens in Buffalo, New York on May 1st. The fair highlights cultural and technological progress in the Western Hemisphere. It draws in millions of visitors, but became tragically known as the site where President McKinley would be assassinated. On May 21st, Connecticut becomes the first state to pass a law regulating motor vehicles, limiting their speed to 12 miles per hour in cities and 15 miles per hour on country roads. Other states were slow to enact their own laws, and by 1930, 28 states still had no speed limit. On July 2nd, the Wild Bunch, including Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, robbed a Great Northern train near Wagner, Montana, stealing an estimated $40,000, which is approximately $1.25 million today. The Socialist Party of America was officially formed on July 29th during a convention in Indianapolis. It became a major third-party force advocating for workers' rights and social reforms. On September 6th, while shaking hands at the Pan American Exposition, President McKinley is shot twice by anarchist Leon Czolgosz. He appeared to be in stable condition after the shooting, but an infection would later set in. On September 14th, President McKinley died from his wounds 8 days after being shot. Vice President Theodore Roosevelt is sworn in as the 26th president, becoming the youngest ever at age 42. On October 12th, new President Theodore Roosevelt gives the Executive Mansion in Washington, D.C. a new name. From this point on, it is referred to as the White House. On October 24th, a 63-year-old schoolteacher named Annie Edson Taylor became the first person to successfully take the plunge over Niagara Falls inside of a barrel and survive. On October 29th, President McKinley's assassin, Leon Czolgosz, is executed in the electric chair at Auburn Prison in New York. The unrepentant killer's last words were, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the working people." On November 25th, patient August Dieter is first examined by the German psychiatrist Dr. Alois Alzheimer, leading to a diagnosis of the condition that will carry Alzheimer's name. American businessman King Gillette begins selling his safety razor blades on December 2nd. Earlier, he had worked out a way for a razor blade to fit inside a holder that could then be replaced when it became dull. The first Nobel Prizes are awarded in Stockholm, Sweden in the fields of physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace on December 10th. The ceremony came on the 5th anniversary of the death of Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite. On December 12th, Italian inventor Guglielmo Marconi transmitted a wireless signal from England to Newfoundland. This historic breakthrough marked the beginning of long-distance wireless communication. In 1902, the United States was stepping boldly into the 20th century. From the birth of major companies and institutions to historic firsts in sports, medicine, and entertainment, 1902 marked the beginning of many American traditions that still endure today. The very first Rose Bowl football game was played on January 1st in Pasadena, California. It featured a matchup between the University of Michigan and Stanford University. Michigan dominated the game, winning 49-0 before it was stopped early. This first game planted the seeds for what would become one of college football's most celebrated traditions. On February 21st, Dr. Harvey Cushing performed his first brain surgery, marking a turning point in American medical history. He would go on to become known as the father of modern neurosurgery. Cushing introduced groundbreaking techniques that made brain operations safer and more precise, and his legacy continues in the field of neurological medicine today. The American Automobile Association, or AAA, was established on March 4th in Chicago. It was created by 9 motor clubs to support drivers and improve road conditions. At a time when cars were still a novelty, AAA played a key role in advocating for better roads and safer travel. Today, it remains a trusted name in roadside assistance and travel services. On March 10th, a U.S. Court of Appeals ruled that Thomas Edison was not the true inventor of the movie camera. The decision credited French inventor Louis Le Prince and others with earlier contributions. Edison had long been seen as the father of motion pictures due to his patents. This ruling, however, reshaped how the history of cinema was understood. Tally's Electric Theater opened its doors in Los Angeles on April 2nd, becoming the first full-time movie theater in the United States. It showcased short films to paying audiences and proved the popularity of moving pictures. Owned by Thomas Talley, it sparked a trend that would lead to the modern movie industry. The Electric Theater helped bring cinema into everyday American life. On April 7th, the Texas Oil Company was formed, which would later become known as Texaco. The company began in Beaumont, Texas, during the state's oil boom. Texaco quickly expanded and became a major player in the petroleum industry. It eventually grew into a global brand, recognized by its iconic star logo. James Cash Penney opened his very first store, the Golden Rule Store, on April 14th in Kemmerer, Wyoming. His philosophy was to treat customers as he would want to be treated. This small store would eventually grow into the national retail chain JCPenney. It became a staple of American shopping malls for much of the 20th century. On May 15th, inventor Lyman Gilmore reportedly achieved powered flight in a steam-powered aircraft. Though poorly documented, his claim predates the Wright brothers' famous flight by over a year. Gilmore's work showed the experimental spirit of the early aviation pioneers. His story remains a curious footnote in the race to the skies. On June 24th, George Dayton founded the Goodfellow Dry Goods Store in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This modest department store would eventually evolve into Target Corporation. Dayton built his business on service and community trust. Over time, it became one of America's most recognizable retail chains. On June 28th, the United States purchased the French concession to build the Panama Canal for $40 million. This deal set the stage for one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history. The canal would revolutionize global trade by connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. It also symbolized America's growing international influence. On August 9th, Edward VII and his wife Alexandra were crowned King and Queen of the United Kingdom in a grand ceremony at Westminster Abbey in London. The event had originally been planned for June 26, but it was abruptly postponed when the king became seriously ill with an abdominal abscess that required immediate surgery. President Theodore Roosevelt made history on August 22nd by becoming the first U.S. president to ride in an automobile. His short ride was a symbol of the nation's shift toward modern technology. Roosevelt embraced progress and helped usher in the age of the motor car. The moment marked a new era of transportation in America. On October 2nd, The Tale of Peter Rabbit by Beatrix Potter was published commercially by Frederick Warne & Company. After initially self-publishing the story, Potter's charming tale and illustrations became an instant hit, marking the start of her legendary career in children's literature. The 1902 anthracite coal strike ended on October 23rd, after nearly 5.5 months of work stoppage. The settlement came following intervention by President Theodore Roosevelt, who helped broker a deal through an independent commission. Miners returned to work shortly afterward, and the commission later granted them a wage increase and shorter hours. On November 18th, Brooklyn toymaker Morris Mitchum named a new stuffed animal the Teddy Bear in honor of President Theodore Roosevelt. The name came from a popular cartoon showing Roosevelt sparring a bear during a hunting trip and refusing to kill it. The toy became an instant hit with children across the country, and it remains a beloved classic over a century later. The year 1903 was filled with historic firsts and transformative moments that signaled the beginning of a new era. From the skies above Kitty Hawk to the origins of many popular businesses, the events of this year helped shape the world we now know. President Theodore Roosevelt and First Lady Edith Roosevelt unveiled major renovations to the White House on New Year's Day. The updates included a new West Wing, built to separate the president's working space from the family's living quarters. This expansion marked a significant shift in how the executive branch functioned. The changes modernized the building and improved the efficiency of presidential operations. The White House now has a dedicated space for official business, laying the groundwork for future administrations. On February 23rd, Cuba signed a lease agreement granting the United States control of Guantanamo Bay in perpetuity. This strategic naval base gave the U.S. a strong military presence in the Caribbean. The agreement followed Cuba's independence and was part of ongoing U.S. involvement in the region. Though controversial over the years, the lease has never been revoked. On May 23rd, Horatio Nelson Jackson, Sewell K. Crocker, and their dog Bud left San Francisco to attempt the first cross-country automobile journey. They traveled in a two-cylinder Winton car with no maps, few roads, and very little infrastructure. After a grueling 63 days, 12 hours, and 30 minutes, they arrived in New York on July 26. The trip proved that automobiles could be used for long-distance travel. It was a pivotal moment in the history of American transportation. On June 16th, Henry Ford officially incorporated the Ford Motor Company. Ford aimed to make automobiles affordable and accessible to everyday Americans. This company would later revolutionize manufacturing through the use of the assembly line. The launch of Ford Motor marked the beginning of mass automobile production. Also on June 16th, the Pepsi-Cola Company was founded in North Carolina. Originally, it was created as a digestive aid, but it soon became a popular soft drink. Pepsi would grow to become a major rival to Coca-Cola in the 20th century. The company's beginnings marked the rise of branded consumer goods in America. The inaugural Tour de France bicycle race began on July 1st in a suburb of Paris. It was created to boost sales for the sports newspaper L'Auto. Riders faced grueling conditions, traveling over 1,500 miles across France, and the event quickly became a national sensation. On August 17th, newspaper publisher Joseph Pulitzer donated $1 million to Columbia University to establish a journalism school and the Pulitzer Prizes. His goal was to raise standards in American journalism, and these awards would later become the most prestigious honors in news, literature, and the arts. The donation reflected Pulitzer's deep belief in the power of the press. On September 27th, the mail train, known as the Old 97, derailed near Danville, Virginia. The crash was caused by excessive speed, while trying to maintain a tight schedule. 11 people died in what became one of the most famous train wrecks in U.S. history. The tragedy would go on to inspire the popular ballad, Wreck of the Old 97, and it became a symbol of the dangers of early rail travel and the pressures placed on engineers. On October 1st, the first modern World Series began, featuring the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Boston Americans. It was the first championship between the National and American leagues. The series helped unify professional baseball, and it increased the sport's national popularity. Boston eventually won the best-of-9 series, with this event laying the foundation for Major League Baseball's annual championship. On October 23rd, the first box of Crayola crayons was produced and sold for 5 cents. It contained 8 colors and was marketed as a safe, affordable way for children to draw. This invention quickly became a classroom staple, and Crayola would go on to define childhood creativity for generations. On November 6th, the United States officially recognized Panama's independence from Colombia. This came just days after Panamanian rebels declared independence. The move paved the way for the U.S. to build the Panama Canal, and this recognition marked a key moment in U.S. involvement in Central American affairs. Mary Anderson received a patent for the windshield wiper on November 10th. She designed the device after observing drivers struggling to see during rainstorms. Although not immediately embraced by the auto industry, her invention became essential to car safety. Over time, it was adopted by all car producers, and her idea was a major step forward in automobile design. The Great Train Robbery premiered on December 1st and is considered the very first American Western film. It was groundbreaking in its use of narrative storytelling and editing techniques. The movie thrilled audiences with its action and realism. The movie starred Justice D. Barnes and G.M. Anderson, and it marked a turning point in the evolution of cinema. On December 10th, Marie and Pierre Curie were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their groundbreaking work on radioactivity and the element radium. Their research laid the foundation for nuclear science and medical treatments. The Curies were among the most celebrated scientists of their time, and their discoveries expanded our understanding of atomic structure. On December 17th, Orville and Wilbur Wright achieved the first powered flight at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Their airplane, the Flyer, stayed in the air for 12 seconds and traveled 120 feet. Their breakthrough changed the course of history, marking the dawn of aviation. On December 30th, a tragic fire broke out at the Iroquois Theater in Chicago, killing over 600 people. It was one of the deadliest theater fires in U.S. history. This fire revealed severe flaws in building design and safety protocols. In response, cities across the country updated fire codes and safety standards, and the disaster prompted widespread reforms in public building safety. 1904 was a year packed with innovation, ambition, and change. Technology was rapidly developing, cities were growing, and remarkable events defined the year. So let's take a look back at some of the most fascinating moments that shaped the year 1904. On January 12th, Henry Ford set a land speed record of 91.37 miles per hour while driving across the frozen surface of Michigan's Lake St. Clair. Behind the wheel of a four-wheeled vehicle nicknamed the 999, Ford's car had a wooden frame, but no body or hood. The daring run drew national attention and helped build Ford's reputation, long before the Model T became a household name. On January 28th, the University of Chicago awarded the first college sports letter to its football seniors. Each player received a blanket adorned with the large letter C, marking the beginning of a tradition that would eventually spread to schools and sports programs all over the country. A devastating disaster struck Baltimore on February 7th, when a massive fire engulfed the city's downtown area. In just over 30 hours, flames destroyed more than 1,500 buildings across 80 city blocks. The fire led to sweeping changes in firefighting practices and highlighted the importance of standardized equipment and cooperation between fire departments. On February 23rd, the United States officially acquired control of the Panama Canal Zone for $10 million. This purchase set the stage for the construction of one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history. Work by U.S. Army engineers would begin just a few months later in May. On April 8th, New York City officially changed the name of Longacre Square to Times Square. The change was made to honor the New York Times newspaper, which had just moved its headquarters to the area. This once ordinary intersection would go on to become one of the most famous landmarks in the world. At the St. Louis World's Fair on April 30th, the ice cream cone made its grand debut. A vendor reportedly came up with the idea on the spot when an ice cream seller ran out of dishes. He rolled up one of his thin waffles to hold the ice cream, and the rest is dessert history. On May 5th, baseball legend Cy Young pitched the first perfect game of the modern era, Playing for the Boston Americans, Young retired every single batter from the Philadelphia Athletics in a 3-0 victory, cementing his legacy as one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. On June 28th, Helen Keller made history by graduating cum laude from Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Deaf and blind since infancy, Keller became the first deaf and blind person to earn a Bachelor of Arts degree. Her graduation marked a powerful moment of triumph in the face of immense adversity. The third modern Olympic Games began on July 1st in St. Louis, and it was the first games held in the United States. Though somewhat overshadowed by the World's Fair happening nearby, these Olympics marked a milestone for American sports and global competition. On September 20th, Orville and Wilbur Wright achieved a major milestone in aviation by successfully flying a complete circle with their Flyer 2 aircraft. This controlled circular flight proved that their invention was more than just a brief hop into the air. It was a functional, steerable flying machine. On October 17th, a small bank called the Bank of Italy opened its doors in San Francisco. Founded by Amedeo Giannini to serve working-class immigrants, this bank would eventually grow into Bank of America, one of the largest financial institutions in the world. A major transportation milestone took place on October 27th, when the New York City subway officially opened to the public. At 2:35 p.m., Mayor George McClellan took the controls of the first train, launching a rapid transit system that would forever change life in the city. On October 28th, the St. Louis Police Department tried out a revolutionary new investigative technique, fingerprinting. Though still new to American law enforcement at the time, fingerprint analysis would go on to become a cornerstone of modern criminal investigations. Harvard University opened a groundbreaking sports facility on November 4th, Harvard Stadium, the first stadium built specifically for American football. Constructed using reinforced concrete, it set the standard for future stadium designs across the country. On November 8th, President Theodore Roosevelt won re-election in a landslide victory over Democrat Alton B. Parker. Having taken office after the assassination of President McKinley, Roosevelt now had a full term to carry out his progressive policies and shape the direction of the nation. Finally, on December 31st, New York City held its first ever New Year's Eve celebration in Times Square. Thousands gathered for fireworks and festivities, beginning a beloved annual tradition that continues to this day with the world-famous ball drop. "1905 was a year of discovery and social change. From Einstein's theory of relativity to the birth of Las Vegas and Unrest in Russia, it was a time when new ideas began reshaping the world. So let's look back at the key events that made up the year 1905. On January 22nd, a peaceful workers' demonstration in St. Petersburg, Russia, turned into a tragedy when government troops opened fire on the crowd. Thousands marched to the Winter Palace with a petition for better working conditions. The brutal response left hundreds dead and became known as Bloody Sunday, a turning point in Russian history that sparked revolutionary unrest. Just 4 days later, on January 26th, miners in South Africa unearthed a stunning discovery, the Cullinan Diamond. Weighing a staggering 3,106 carats, it remains the largest diamond ever found and was eventually cut into gems that became part of the British crown jewels. On January 30th, the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a major decision in the case of Swift & Company versus the United States. The ruling gave the federal government the authority to regulate monopolies under the Commerce Clause, strengthening antitrust laws and marking a turning point in the fight against corporate power. The very first Rotary Club was formed on February 23rd, when 4 men gathered in a small office in the Unity Building in Chicago. Their goal was simple: to foster friendship and community service. What began as a modest meeting grew into a global movement that still thrives today. On March 15th, Franklin Roosevelt married his distant cousin Eleanor Roosevelt in New York City. The couple would go on to become one of America's most influential political partnerships, leaving a lasting impact on the nation and the world. May 15th marks the founding of Las Vegas, Nevada. Just 110 acres of desert land were auctioned off that day, laying the groundwork for what would eventually become a world-famous city of lights, casinos, and entertainment. A major leap in transportation happened on June 11th, when the Pennsylvania Railroad introduced the fastest train in the world. The new express service cut travel time between New York and Chicago to just 18 hours, an incredible feat at the time. On June 19th, one of the first Nickelodeon theaters opened its doors in Pittsburgh, offering affordable, short-motion pictures to the public. These small storefront cinemas helped launch the film industry and introduced a brand new form of entertainment to everyday Americans. A scientific revolution took shape on June 30th, when Albert Einstein published his theory of special relativity. With the simple but profound equation E equals mc squared, he forever changed the way we understand time, space, and energy. On July 11th, W.E.B. Du Bois and a group of Black intellectuals and activists gathered to form the Niagara Movement. This early civil rights organization laid the foundation for future progress, advocating for equal rights and challenging racial injustice in America. Flight history was made again on October 5th, when Wilbur Wright piloted the Wright Flyer 3 for 39 minutes straight. It was the first airplane flight to last over half an hour, proving that powered flight was becoming more practical and controlled. On November 25th, the Telemco Company placed the first ever advertisement for a home radio set in Scientific American. Priced at $8.50, the set promised to receive signals up to 1 mile, kicking off the consumer radio era that would soon transform communication. Finally, on December 16th, the very first issue of Variety was published, covering theater, vaudeville, film, and later television. The magazine quickly became the entertainment industry's go-to source for news, reviews, and trends. In 1906, the U.S. population had crossed 85 million, and the year was filled with upheaval and reform. From devastating natural disasters to major steps forward in public health, the events of this year left a lasting mark. Let's take a look back at the moments that defined 1906. On January 2nd, Willis Carrier was granted a U.S. patent for his groundbreaking invention, the modern air conditioner. Originally designed to control humidity in a printing plant, Carrier's system would go on to transform everything from office buildings and movie theaters to homes and hospitals, forever changing how people live and work in warm climates. February 1st marked the completion of the first federal penitentiary building in Leavenworth, Kansas, designed to hold long-term federal prisoners. The massive stone structure symbolized a new era in U.S. criminal justice and would soon house some of the nation's most infamous inmates. On February 18th, John B. Stetson, the legendary hat maker who created the iconic cowboy hat, passed away. His signature wide-brimmed hats were a staple of the American West and became a timeless symbol of rugged independence and frontier spirit. A major moment in food history happened on February 19th, when W.K. Kellogg co-founded the Battle Creek Toasted Cornflake Company in Michigan. After a bitter falling out with his brother, W.K. struck out on his own, launching what would become the global breakfast brand Kellogg's. February 26 saw the release of Upton Sinclair's searing novel, The Jungle. Intended to highlight the struggles of immigrant workers, the book instead shocked readers with its graphic depiction of unsanitary conditions in the meatpacking industry. This prompted public outrage and political reform in Washington. On March 13th, the nation mourned the death of Susan B. Anthony, a tireless activist for women's rights and social justice. For decades, Anthony had fought for women's suffrage, giving speeches, organizing movements, and paving the way for the eventual passage of the 19th Amendment. College athletics took a major step forward on March 31st, with the founding of the Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the United States. Sparked by growing concerns over player safety in football, the organization set standardized rules for amateur sports and would later become known as the NCAA, the governing body of college sports in America. Disaster struck on April 18th when a massive earthquake rocked San Francisco, with an estimated magnitude of 7.8. The quake and the fires that followed devastated the city, killing at least 3,000 people, leveling thousands of buildings, and leaving nearly 300,000 residents homeless in one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. On May 30th, chocolate magnate Milton Hershey opened Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, a leisure retreat originally created for his factory workers and their families. The park offered a place for rest, relaxation, and recreation, and it would eventually grow into one of America's most beloved amusement parks. Food safety laws saw a major breakthrough on June 30th, when Congress passed the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drug Act. These landmark laws came largely in response to the jungle and marked the beginning of government regulation to protect consumers from unsafe products and dishonest labeling. July 14th saw the founding of Gary, Indiana, a planned industrial city created by U.S. Steel and named after Elbert Henry Gary, one of U.S. Steel's founders. Built from the ground up to support the booming steel industry, Gary quickly became a symbol of American industrial power and opportunity, attracting workers from all over the country. On September 5th, football made a bold leap into the modern era when Bradbury Robinson of St. Louis University threw the sport's first legal forward pass. This historic play, made possible by a rule change that year, opened up the game and made football faster and more dynamic. Tragedy unfolded on September 22nd during the Atlanta race riot, when racial tensions erupted into deadly violence. Over several days, white mobs attacked black residents and destroyed homes and businesses, resulting in at least 27 deaths and severe damage to Atlanta's black-owned business district. Just 2 days later, on September 24th, President Theodore Roosevelt declared Devil's Tower in Wyoming as the first national monument in U.S. history. The towering rock formation, sacred to Native American tribes, became a symbol of the growing movement to preserve America's natural wonders. On November 9th, Roosevelt made history again by becoming the first sitting U.S. president to leave the country while in office. He traveled to Panama to inspect construction on the Panama Canal, highlighting its strategic importance to U.S. commerce and military power. And finally, on December 10th, President Roosevelt was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for brokering peace in the Russo-Japanese War. He became the first American to receive the prestigious honor, further establishing his legacy as a bold and active leader on the world stage. In 1907, the United States population was 87 million. This year saw many familiar companies form, while panic was setting in on Wall Street later in the year. The world was changing fast, so let's take a look back at the key moments that helped shape the year 1907. On January 1, 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt set a peculiar record by shaking hands with 8,513 people in a single day at a New Year's Day reception at the White House. It was a symbol of his energetic style and personal approach to leadership. February 26th saw the merger of Royal Dutch Petroleum and Shell Transport and Trading Company, forming a powerful oil alliance that would eventually evolve into British Petroleum, one of the world's largest energy companies. On April 17th, Ellis Island experienced its busiest day ever, processing over 11,700 immigrants. The year would go on to be its most active, with more than 1.1 million people arriving in America through its gates in search of a better life. August 17th marked the official opening of Seattle's Pike Place Market, where local farmers and producers sold directly to consumers. More than a century later, it remains one of the oldest and most iconic public markets in the U.S. Daring escape artist Harry Houdini pulled off one of his signature stunts on August 26, when he freed himself from underwater chains in just 57 seconds at San Francisco's aquatic park, thrilling crowds and adding to his legendary reputation. August 28th was the founding date of American Messenger Service in Seattle by 19-year-old Jim Casey. This modest messenger business would eventually grow into the global shipping giant we know today as UPS. The luxury passenger liner RMS Lusitania departed on its maiden voyage on September 7th, traveling from Liverpool to New York City. The ship symbolized a new era in transatlantic travel, though it would later become infamous during World War I. On September 10th, the first Neiman Marcus store opened its doors in Dallas, Texas. Known for high-end fashion and impeccable service, it quickly became a cornerstone of luxury retail in America. October 1st was a day of glamour in New York City, with the grand opening of the Plaza Hotel at 5th Avenue and 59th Street. It quickly became one of the most elegant and recognizable hotels in the world. That same day, October 1st, a downturn in the stock market led to widespread financial anxiety and a run on the dollar. The tension foreshadowed a larger financial crisis that would unfold later in the month. By October 22nd, the panic of 1907 was in full swing when New York's Knickerbocker Trust Company collapsed. Financier J.P. Morgan stepped in to prevent disaster by organizing a $25 million bailout to stabilize Wall Street, a move that would later inspire the creation of the Federal Reserve System. Also on October 22nd, the Ringling Brothers Circus purchased its biggest rival, Barnum & Bailey, combining to form what would be called the greatest show on earth. This merger created the largest and most famous circus of its time. A major milestone in U.S. history occurred on November 16th, when Indian Territory and Oklahoma Territory were officially combined to form the state of Oklahoma, the 46th state to join the Union. December 16th marked a show of American naval strength, as President Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet on a worldwide cruise. Painted white to symbolize peace, the fleet toured the globe to demonstrate the United States' growing power on the world stage. On that same day, December 16th, opera singer Eugenia Ferrar became the first person to perform live over a wireless radio broadcast, singing from the Brooklyn Navy Yard in a moment that quietly hinted at the future of mass communication. Finally, on December 31st, New York rang in a new year with a dazzling innovation, the first electric ball drop in Times Square. This glowing sphere marked the start of what would become a timeless New Year's Eve tradition, watched around the world. In 1908, the United States population had grown to over 88 million. During this year, there were daring journeys across America, breakthroughs in technology, and surprising challenges that left a real mark on history. The year was filled with memorable moments, so let's take a closer look at the year 1908. On January 11th, President Theodore Roosevelt declared the Grand Canyon a national monument. By protecting this massive landscape, 277 miles long and up to a mile deep, Roosevelt ensured that its beauty and geologic wonder would endure for future generations. Just 10 days later, on January 21st, New York City passed the infamous Sullivan Ordinance, making it illegal for women to smoke in public places. The law sparked immediate backlash and controversy, and Mayor George McClellan Jr. would repeal it just 2 weeks later after an outcry over its blatant discrimination. On January 22nd, Katie Mulcahy was arrested for lighting a cigarette on the street in defiance of the Sullivan Ordinance. Fined $5, she told the judge, "I've got as much right to smoke as you have." Her bold stand quickly made headlines and became an early rallying point for women's rights. A few days later, on January 24th, Robert Baden-Powell published Scouting for Boys, a manual packed with lessons on outdoor skills, character building, and self-reliance. The book inspired a youth scouting movement that would go on to spread across the globe and shape the character of millions of young people. By February 18th, the U.S. Postal Service had introduced the first postage stamps in rolls rather than sheets. Designed for machines and easier dispensing, these stamps streamlined mail handling and became a small but significant innovation in America's everyday life. Tragedy struck on March 4th at Lakeview Elementary School in Collinwood, Ohio, when a boiler room fire engulfed the school. The fast-spreading blaze killed 172 children and 2 teachers, horrifying the nation and sparking immediate changes in school safety codes and emergency evacuation procedures. On April 24th, Jacob and Anna Murdoch embarked on an ambitious journey across America with their children in a Packard 30. Traveling from Los Angeles to New York City over 32 days and 5 hours, they became the first family to successfully drive coast to coast, showing the promise and adventure of the new automobile age. On May 2nd, the now famous song Take Me Out to the Ball Game, written by Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilzer, was officially registered for copyright. Though neither had ever attended a game, their catchy melody and nostalgic lyrics would become a timeless seventh-inning tradition. May 10th marked the first Mother's Day celebration in Philadelphia, created by Anna Jarvis to honor the memory of her mother. The holiday gained rapid national attention and was officially recognized by President Woodrow Wilson just a few years later. May 21st was the premiere of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, one of the earliest American horror films. Shot in Chicago and based on Robert Louis Stevenson's novel, the silent adaptation showcased how film could explore darker, psychological themes and created a blueprint for the horror genre. On June 16th, President Theodore Roosevelt officially backed William Howard Taft as his successor during the Republican National Convention in Chicago. Roosevelt's endorsement would help Taft win the presidency that fall and continue many of his progressive policies. Just a few days later, on June 20th, Lucy Maud Montgomery received her first published copy of Anne of Green Gables, which had already become a literary sensation in Canada. Montgomery's novel about a feisty, imaginative orphan would win the hearts of readers worldwide and remain a beloved classic for generations. On July 1st, the International Distress Signal, SOS, was adopted as the global standard for maritime emergencies. Its simple rhythmic sequence, 3 dots, 3 dashes, 3 dots, was easy to recognize and sent a universal call for help across the seas. July 26 saw the birth of the FBI, as Attorney General Charles Bonaparte created a small investigative team under the Department of Justice. Originally focused on white-collar crimes and antitrust violations, this tiny corps would evolve into America's most famous law enforcement agency. On August 8th, the Hoover Company purchased rights to an upright vacuum cleaner invented by James Spangler. This innovation would make housework easier and lead Hoover to become a household name synonymous with vacuuming. Just 4 days later, on August 12th, Henry Ford's company completed the first Model T. Designed for the average American, its affordable price and sturdy design would soon put millions on the road, kickstarting America's love affair with the automobile. On September 16th, William Durant founded General Motors in Flint, Michigan. Combining a range of car makers under one company, Durant envisioned a new, unified automotive powerhouse that would come to rival Ford as one of the world's largest automakers. That same week, on September 17th, Thomas Selfridge became the first person to die in a powered airplane crash. Flying as a passenger with Orville Wright in Fort Myer, Virginia, he was killed when the plane went down after a propeller broke. His death highlighted the risks facing aviation's earliest pioneers. On October 14th, the Chicago Cubs defeated the Detroit Tigers to win their second consecutive World Series title. Little did they, or their fans, know that they wouldn't hoist the trophy again for another 108 years, making this championship one of baseball's most bittersweet milestones. On November 3rd, William Howard Taft was elected America's 27th president, defeating perennial Democrat candidate William Jennings Bryan. Taft, Roosevelt's chosen successor, would continue his mentor's progressive legacy while also carving his own path in the White House. That same month, on November 10th, the Gideons placed their very first Bible in a hotel room. The gesture would grow into a worldwide ministry that left copies of Scripture in hotel rooms across the globe. Finally, on December 26th, Jack Johnson defeated Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia, to become boxing's first African-American heavyweight champion. Johnson's victory challenged racial barriers and thrilled boxing fans around the world, cementing his place in sports history. In 1909, America's population was soaring to 90 million people. This year was full of brave journeys to the ends of the earth, while the new aircraft industry took off with financial investments. It was a time of incredible change, so let's look back at some of the key events that made 1909 a remarkable year. On January 9th, Ernest Shackleton's British Nimrod expedition reached 88 degrees 23 minutes south latitude, closer to the South Pole than anyone had ever been before. With supplies running low, Shackleton decided to turn back, forever marking this as one of the most daring adventures of the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. February 12th saw the formation of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP, born from the Niagara Movement and outrage over racial injustice. This civil rights organization would go on to fight for the rights of African Americans for generations to come. On March 1st, the University of Minnesota established the first dedicated school of nursing at a U.S. university. It was a milestone that set a new academic standard for nursing education and professionalized the practice across the nation. Despite a March 4th snowstorm blanketing Washington, D.C. with 10 inches of snow, William Howard Taft was inaugurated as America's 27th president. James S. Sherman also took the oath as the 27th vice president, and together they began a new chapter in the White House. March 23rd marked the departure of former President Theodore Roosevelt on the Smithsonian Roosevelt African Expedition, sponsored by the Smithsonian Institution and National Geographic Society. The trip would take Roosevelt across East Africa to hunt big game and gather scientific specimens. On March 31st, workers at the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast began construction on the RMS Titanic. Designed to be the most luxurious ocean liner ever built, its keel laying was the first step in creating a ship that would become legendary and tragic just a few years later. April 6th is believed to be the day Robert Peary and his team nearly reached the North Pole after years of Arctic exploration. Though some dispute the exact moment of his arrival, Peary's announcement of reaching the pole would captivate the world. Setting a new record for endurance on May 8th, American marathoner Albert Raines ran a world record time of 2 hours, 46 minutes, and 4.6 seconds in New York City. This feat thrilled sports fans and hinted at the modern popularity of long-distance running. On June 7th, a bright star was born when 16-year-old Mary Pickford made her screen debut. Dubbed America's sweetheart, Pickford would soon become one of the most famous and influential figures of early Hollywood. June 16th was a day of aviation history when Glenn Curtiss sold the first commercial airplane in the United States for $5,000. This sale marked a turning point for the aviation industry, as airplanes moved from experimental machines into commercial use. On July 12th, Congress passed the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which would give the federal government the power to tax personal income. A few years later, it would be ratified, and this amendment would change the financial landscape of the United States forever. That same summer, on August 2nd, the U.S. Mint began issuing its first Lincoln pennies. Designed by Victor David Brenner, they were created to celebrate the centennial of Abraham Lincoln's birth and introduced a coin design that is still in use today. Also on August 2nd, the U.S. Army Signal Corps purchased the world's first military plane, a Wright military flyer. This groundbreaking acquisition at Fort Myer, Virginia, set the stage for the future of aerial combat and reconnaissance. The Payne-Aldrich Tariff Act was signed by President Taft on August 9th, attempting to lower tariffs. However, compromise and controversy surrounded the law, and it would become a flashpoint for political battles over trade and reform. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway saw its first major auto race on August 19th, with the inaugural events paving the way for what would become one of the most famous motor racing venues in the world. On November 11th, the U.S. Navy established a new base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. This strategic move signaled America's growing naval presence in the Pacific, decades before Pearl Harbor would become a household name. 2 days later, on November 13th, Collier's Weekly magazine published a story accusing U.S. Secretary of the Interior Richard Ballinger of questionable dealings concerning Alaskan coal fields. The resulting scandal would put a spotlight on conservation issues and tarnish President Taft's administration. Finally, on December 7th, inventor Leo Baekeland patented Bakelite, the world's first fully synthetic plastic. Lightweight, durable, and moldable, Bakelite would become a game-changing material, sparking the birth of the modern plastics industry. In 1910, the United States was home to just over 92 million people, and changing rapidly. The year was filled with many firsts, including new sports milestones, along with steps toward modern public safety. It was a year that shaped the future in surprising ways. So let's look back at the events of 1910. The Boy Scouts of America was officially incorporated on February 8th by Chicago publisher William D. Boyce. Inspired by the British Scouting movement, Boyce hoped to teach young men outdoor skills, leadership, and good citizenship, values that still define the Scouts today. That same month, on February 19th, Mary Mallon, better known as Typhoid Mary, was released after years of forced isolation. Unfortunately, she would go on to cause more typhoid outbreaks in New York City, becoming one of the most infamous public health figures in U.S. history. Disaster struck on March 1st, when a massive wall of snow collapsed in the Cascade Mountains, near Stevens Pass, Washington. The avalanche destroyed 3 passenger trains and killed 96 people, making it the deadliest avalanche in U.S. history. On March 18th, the world's first filmed version of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein was released. This silent film, starring Charles Ogle as the monster, paved the way for a century of cinematic scares. By April 9th, astronomers had their telescopes trained on the sky. And in Gore, New Zealand, Halley's Comet was first seen lighting up the sky. Its bright return captivated millions around the globe, as it made its close pass by Earth. While it was a notable astronomical occurrence, it also triggered widespread panic, fueled by media sensationalism and public fear. On April 14th, President William Howard Taft started a new tradition that lives on today, throwing the first ceremonial pitch on Major League Baseball's opening day. Ever since, presidents have taken part in this uniquely American ritual. That spring, on April 21st, legendary American writer Mark Twain passed away at his home in Connecticut. Twain's humor, wit, and social commentary left an unforgettable mark on American literature. A major royal transition took place on May 6th, when George V became King of the United Kingdom after the death of his father, Edward VII. George would reign through some of the most turbulent years of the 20th century, including World War I. On June 19th, the very first Father's Day was celebrated in Spokane, Washington. Sonora Smart Dodd, one of 6 children raised by a widowed father, campaigned to create a holiday honoring fathers, and the tradition quickly took off across the country. Boxing history was made on July 4th, with the fight of the century, when heavyweight champion Jack Johnson defeated former champ James Jeffries in Reno, Nevada. Johnson's victory was a defining moment in sports and civil rights history, breaking racial barriers at the time. On August 6th, New York City's mayor, William J. Gaynor, survived an assassination attempt after being shot at close range while boarding a ship. Although Gaynor survived the shooting, the attack left him in fragile health for the rest of his life. That same week, on August 9th, Chicago inventor Alva Fisher was granted a U.S. patent for his electric washing machine. Fisher's design was one of the earliest to take the labor out of laundry and forever changed household chores. Also, on August 25th, John Hertz founded the Yellow Cab Company in Chicago. What began with a handful of taxis would grow into one of the most recognizable names in urban transportation. On September 12th, Los Angeles hired its first female police officer, Alice Stebbins Wells. Her appointment was a historic milestone for women in law enforcement and paved the way for future generations. And finally, on November 29th, inventor Ernest Siren was issued the first U.S. patent for a traffic light system. Though rudimentary, Siren's design was a breakthrough in keeping busy streets safe, and it set the stage for modern traffic control systems. Recollection Road loves to recommend LEGACYBOX because we both believe in preserving the past. If you have a cluttered closet with cherished home videos and photos that rarely see the light of day, then you need to visit LEGACYBOX.com/recollection. These irreplaceable heirlooms are rapidly fading away, and they deserve to be digitized and shared with family and friends. And right now, LEGACYBOX is offering you $9 tape transfers. The process is simple. Send in your LEGACYBOX filled with old VHS tapes, camcorder tapes, and pictures. Their team will professionally digitize everything by hand, right here in the USA. You'll get the originals returned to you, along with organized digital copies. I love LEGACYBOX because it makes all my favorite memories available anytime. I can post them on social media or pull up a slideshow on my TV, which keeps special family moments alive. Visit LEGACYBOX.com/recollection to shop their $9 tape sale. That's LEGACYBOX.com/recollection to unlock this incredible offer. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and make sure to check the description of this video for links to pick up a t-shirt and sign up for the newsletter. Thank you to our loyal Patreon supporters listed here. Visit patreon.com/recollectionroad to join the club.